Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. You know we love it when you send us stuff to dig into, and you guys really delivered this time.
Yeah, definitely intriguing.
Someone sent in this piece from Neuroscience News all about how sleep actually refines our memories. So we had to get our resident expert in to, well, deep dive into it with us.
Always happy to deep dive.
All right, so this study, it really caught our eye because it specifically looks at how sleep impacts memories of places.
Yeah, spatial memory.
Exactly. And the research comes out of the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria. That's ISTA for you acronym lovers out there.
Right, ISTA, based in Vienna.
That's right. Led by a Professor Josef Sixvari. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
You did.
Okay, great. So we're going to unpack their findings, kind of translate it from hardcore neuroscience to something, a little more digestible.
Yeah, definitely. Like a cheat sheet to understanding this complex brain process. I like that.
Right.
Cheat sheet to the brain.
So we all kind of know, right, that sleep helps with memory. Like we've all pulled all-nighters and felt that brain fog the next day.
Oh, absolutely.
But this research is really looking at the how, like what's actually going on at the neuron level.
The nitty-gritty.
Yeah. So let's start with the basics. What were these scientists actually trying to figure out? What was their core question?
Well, they were tackling this really fundamental question about how sleep actually optimizes our ability to recall memories. There's been tons of research on learning and memory formation, but, a lot of questions still remain unanswered, especially about, like you said, the how.
So walk us through how they went about doing this research. What was their methodology?
Okay, so they used rats, classic neuroscience
Right,
subjects.
the lab rat.
Yeah, and they implanted these tiny little sensors, super high-tech, to track neuronal activity in their brains.
So they could actually see the brain cells firing.
Yeah, in real time for up to, get this, 20 hours of sleep. Which is pretty impressive, right? Like much longer than most studies have been able to do before.
Yeah, definitely.
So they focused on spatial learning. They had these mazes set up where the rats had to learn and remember where to find food rewards.
Those snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
So why was spatial learning so important for this study?
Well, it turns out that spatial learning relies heavily on a specific part of the brain, the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as your brain's built-in GPS, for navigation and learning about your environment.
So like when you're trying to remember where you parked your car.
Exactly. Or how to get back home from a new place. That's your hippocampus doing its thing. And what's really interesting is that the researchers found that the locations where the rats found those food rewards, those became overrepresented in the hippocampus. Like they formed these hot spots of activity. They called it a cognitive map.
Like a mental map of their surroundings, but the reward spots were in bold.
Exactly. Super highlighted. And this is what they really wanted to watch during sleep. What happens to these reward locations in the cognitive map?
Okay, so they've got these rats. They're learning the maze. Their little rat brains are firing. What did they see happening when the rats finally got to sleep for those 20 hours?
All right, so here's where things get super interesting. We've known for a while now that when we sleep, the hippocampus reactivates those memories. Like it replays them.
Like hitting play on a recording of the day's events.
Yeah, pretty much. Professor Sixvari's group, they actually discovered this a few years ago. They found that the more frequently a reward location was reactivated during sleep, the better the rat remembered it when they woke up.
So practice makes perfect, even when you're sleeping.
Yeah, sort of. And conversely, if they blocked this reactivation, then the rat's memory was impaired. So this replay during sleep is clearly crucial for forming those lasting memories.
So the replay, that part wasn't really the news here though, right?
That's right. The real breakthrough came from analyzing what happened over those long sleep periods. They found that these neuronal patterns, the ones representing those reward locations, actually reorganized themselves.
So it's not just a straight replay. There's more to it.
Right. And they found that not all the neurons that fired when the rat was initially learning the maze, not all of those stayed active throughout the entire sleep period.
Like some neurons got tired and clocked out.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like a shift change. They noticed that there was this stable subgroup of neurons that remained active throughout the sleep. But then, as sleep progressed, a new group of neurons would become active.
So some stayed on and some new recruits came in.
Precisely. And the really fascinating thing is they found that over time, this pattern of which neurons were firing, it shifted. It actually morphed from resembling the brain activity during the learning phase to resembling the activity during the recall phase.
Like the brain was practicing the act of remembering.
Yeah, it's almost like the brain was optimizing the memory for recall, not just replaying the initial experience. And they called this shift representational drift.
Representational drift. Okay, I'm gonna need you to unpack that a little bit.
Sure, sure. Think of it like this. Imagine you're learning a new route somewhere. At first, you're paying attention to every little detail, right? Every landmark, every turn.
Right, trying not to get lost.
Exactly. But after a good night's sleep, you might find that you only need to remember a few key
Like
landmarks.
the brain streamlines the route.
Precisely. It figures out the most efficient way to get from point A to point B, and that's kind of what this representational drift might be doing for our memories, making them more efficient, easier to recall.
Makes sense.
And they also looked at how different sleep stages affect this drift. And they found that non-REM sleep, that deeper, slower wave sleep, that actually sped up the representational drift.
Non-REM pushing the change.
Yeah. But then REM sleep, the one where we dream, that seemed to counteract it a little bit.
So REM was kind of like, hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, it's like this fascinating push and pull between the different sleep stages.
Really interesting. So why would our brains go through this whole process of reorganizing these neuronal patterns? What's the benefit of representational drift?
Well, the researchers think that the initial memory representations, the ones we form when we first learn something, they might not be the most efficient for long-term storage. Think of it like writing a first draft of a paper.
Okay, yeah. Get all the ideas down, but it's messy.
Right, it needs editing. And that's kind of what they think sleep, especially non-REM sleep, might be doing, is optimizing those memories, making them more efficient, less resource intensive for the brain to hold on to.
Streamlining them so we can free up space for more memories.
Exactly, and they actually found evidence to support this. After the rats had slept, fewer neurons were actually needed to recall a specific reward location compared to before sleep.
So the memory was still there, but it was using less brain power.
Precisely, like it had been condensed, optimized, and this could free up other neurons for learning and storing new memories.
So it's not just about remembering more, it's also about making space to keep learning new things.
Exactly, like decluttering your mental hard drive.
And the researchers also talked about how this could be linked to fitting new information in with what we already know.
Yes, that's another really interesting aspect of this. They think that this representational drift, combined with the reactivation during sleep, could help integrate new memories into our existing web of knowledge.
Like weaving it all together.
Yeah, like finding the right place for it in the big picture. And these subtle shifts in the neuronal patterns during sleep, those could be crucial for forging those connections, making the new information more meaningful and easier to recall in the context of what you already understand.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. So sleep is not just passively storing memories, it's actively shaping them and making them more efficient.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about this research. It really highlights how dynamic memory is and how crucial sleep is for that whole process.
All right, let's do a quick recap for our listeners just to make sure we're all on the same page. So this research, looking at spatial memory in rats, found that sleep is not just a downtime for our brains, it's an active process of memory processing and optimization, particularly during non-REM sleep. And this process, they call it representational drift, involves shifts in neuronal activity patterns, making memories more efficient and potentially freeing up our brains for new learning. How did I do?
Spot on. I think our listeners are going to walk away from this with a whole new appreciation for what their brains are doing while they're snoozing.
Definitely. This deep dive into the neuroscience news report and this research from ISTA has given us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I mean, considering that this representational drift is happening in our own brains every night.
Right. Every night.
It really makes you wonder.
Absolutely.
How is this constantly shaping our understanding of our own past experiences and our ability to learn new things? I mean, could understanding this process even better? Could that lead to new strategies for improving memory or even treating memory disorders?
Huge implications for so many things.
Exactly. I mean, who knew sleep was such a powerful tool for shaping our minds? It's definitely something to ponder, maybe even dream about tonight.
Right. Maybe some representational drift happening right now.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We'll catch you next time.
See you then.